so thrilled to be chatting with Nicole Diaz and David Mangini, both of Snap and Ethena customer. We have Nicole, who's the global head of integrity and compliance, and David, who's a senior compliance manager. And today we're just going to talk about their experience with Ethena, their experience in general working in compliance, and then their experience being at a deeply cool company, which is Snap. I always love to start with just, could you both tell me, maybe we start with David for this one and we'll just popcorn, just a little bit about your role, like what you do, what you're responsible for.
Yeah, thanks, Roxanne. So David Mangini, Senior Compliance Program Manager. Our team is kind of built into two parts. One is the legal side and the other is the operations side. And I sit on the operations side of the team. But we work very closely together. So I work with Nicole on a lot of training launches, policy management, and acknowledgement campaigns. And then I also oversee a lot of our systems and controls that we use. So any sort of automated or technological controls that we have, I work with Nicole on implementing them and then managing the day-to-day functionality of those systems and controls.
Super helpful. And Nicole, for you?
Yeah, no, great summary. So I head up the legal function, and my title actually is Global Head of Integrity and Compliance Legal, to note that I kind of had that pillar of our work. Yep. And as David said, we are peanut butter and jelly. I do kind of the policy scoping and really thinking about what sort of guidance our team members might need, and then work with David to bring that to life.
Super helpful. And then I think most people are familiar with Snap as a company, but maybe could you just give us a sense of like rough number of employees, kind of global scale, like anything that just might help people understand a little bit about what it's like to work at Snap?
Sure. We are a company of about 5,000 employees. We are operating in over 20 countries. David probably has the more accurate count. Our team members overall are really, I think we're a really culture forward company. We have our core values are kind, smart, and creative. And I do think that accurately describes our company. Our team members really care about having a positive impact in the world and about the mission of our product, which is really to bring to enhance people's real relationships with other humans. So I think the compliance work that we do really happens within that context.
That's super helpful. And I like both those values and the fact that there are 3 of them. I feel like it's always very good when a company has like a finite number of values versus like a laundry list. And you're like, which one is more important? So I think that's really lovely. And then I creeped on LinkedIn to remind myself of it before this, but you both have quite like distinguished careers. You've been at a bunch of different places. And I'm just kind of curious, and maybe this would start with Nicole and go to David, what your experience has been like managing compliance programs before, kind of the good, the bad. I know, Nicole, your point super well heard on legal having kind of like such a broad purview. So I'm curious for you, maybe like how much of compliance have you been working with before, and just kind of any like sort of key takeaways of your experience working in compliance to date.
Yeah, so I actually was a litigator for most of my career, and I started off doing white collar defense at a big law firm.
Oh, say whenever anyone says I was a litigator, I'm immediately like, oh, I hope I'm picking my words correctly. There's something incredibly impressive about that where I'm just suddenly like, I'm taking notes.
I'm taking grammar notes.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, oh no, there were a lot
that actually relates to my not cool story. So you're not.
Oh, good. I'm excited. Okay.
Yeah, but I think my experience with white collar defense was interesting because I was on a very lengthy case and trial as part of the stock options backdating scandals that swept history. And what I really learned from digging into that case over the course of a few years was a lot of compliance misses really happen at the level of people.
Yeah.
So as lawyers, I think non-compliance lawyers, we sort of want to think, well, here's the law. I just go in and tell people to follow it and what the rules are. And if they don't, that's on them. And I think when you really dig into how white collar issues can arise, or whether or not they're, you ultimately think they're criminal, there's something enough that would, that's a painful experience that any company wants to avoid, and any individual wants to avoid. And I do think it really happens at the level of culture and people and the dynamics that they have between them. So that has really informed my view of compliance and how we deliver our messages to people, and how we understand, why issues might arise and what we can do about them.
I have to ask a follow-up because I'm so interested in this. And my background's not a litigator, but I was in the Army, and I feel like the Army kind of has, like what you just said really resonated, where I think some parts of it, they really try, but some parts were really just like, you tell people the rules. Then you told them, that's fine. It's like, oh no, like there's so much, there's like such a big gap between what you think you have told somebody and what they have understood. And I'm curious, at like a company like Snap, like I would just imagine, for example, you all use our anti-bribery training. Like whenever I talk to someone who's not in compliance, like obviously don't take bribes. They're like, yep, no, that makes sense. But there's a lot of complexity. If you might be in sales, like especially if you're operating globally, like there's so much that's not obvious in my opinion. I'm kind of curious, have you seen that where like employees of course want to do the right thing, but maybe they've just never really been told it in a language that isn't like legalese?
Yeah. And I think in some sense your friend's right. Like some of the bigger frauds or scandals are very intentional efforts by people to put cash in their own pockets.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think, then you're really looking at just detection and whistleblowing, increasing those. But there is a lot of area where there is gray area, and employees can find themselves in a slippery slope, or they're trying to do something good for the company, or they find themselves in a hard place where there doesn't seem, to be a good way to achieve their objectives without maybe greasing the wheels a bit. And so I think you can speak to those situations and help both increase people's awareness of how those situations arise, and then also help them understand that the company would have their back and does want to know. And the right thing to do is to loop people in rather than to try and navigate those situations on their own.
Yeah, I think that point on making sure that employees know that it's okay to come with a problem, not a solution to compliance, to legal, to people, is super important, because that can be a very intimidating conversation to have.
Yes.
And then David, similarly, I believe if I got it right, you've been at some quite large companies running compliance. Obviously Snap is quite big too, but I'm curious from your perspective what your kind of historic experience has been running it. I feel like I talked to a lot of folks in your position who often, like, the systems are so manual that sometimes they're just kind of in like survive mode, meaning like, have we even just gotten people the right training? They're like buried in CSVs. Just kind of curious what your historic experience has been managing large compliance programs.
Yeah, so my previous two roles were in the financial services industry, so incredibly highly regulated. One company was 250,000 employees, the other one was 50,000. So
It's like a country.
yeah, totally different. And compliance as a function sort of sits in an ivory tower when you're at a company that big, where you're just saying like, you need to follow these rules, and people started to think of you as the big scary people. Particularly at the first firm I was in, a function that solely focused on investigations. So the only time that they would talk to us was when the bad thing already happened.
Yeah.
So there's just like a whole lot of fear around that. So I think, what's been great about Snap is that I came in at a time when we were building the thing. Snap is a relatively young company compared to these others that I had been at. So that gave us a chance to put these systems in place that were more automated. It took a lot of, the heavy lifting off of our team's hands, where we could say, all right, like, let's find solutions in products that are going to integrate into our existing systems so that the communication is seamless amongst, whether it's HR, whether it's our compliance team, other teams within legal. And I think because they communicate well, that's made it so much easier for our employees to
Yeah,
adopt these systems, right? Like if you have a huge barrier to entry for the employees, they're not even going to use the systems.
totally.
And we experienced that with one of our previous vendors. People were confused as to who they were, who the emails were coming from. People always thought it was phishing. Just
Yeah.
made it hard for our employees to complete trainings or submit disclosures if they needed to.
Yeah.
So I think as we were building the systems and going through the implementation process, we were really strategic in getting feedback from the actual users who are the everyday employee who need to use these things.
Totally. And remind me, do you all use the Slack integration with Ethena to deliver training?
We do not. There were some security issues where we couldn't
Sure,
get
sure.
the integration set up. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. But no, it's totally heard that. I feel like we often say like never put a barrier between an employee and something they already don't want to do.
Right.
And so even just like magic links or like making the logins really easy, I think is crucial. And so you guys have incredibly high completion rates, which I imagine is testament to setting up a really smooth system.
Yeah, absolutely. And to Athena's credit, the team insights has been super helpful,
Mm.
where managers can see, hey, I've got 10 people on my team who haven't completed this. They see that in one simple dashboard, whereas other systems, they might get 10 separate emails and they start to think, oh, this is just another reminder from that system. I'm going to glance over it. So having all of that information in one kind of nice, easy to use reminder, one-stop shop has been a huge help for us to get those completion rates up.
I love that. Nicole, look like you had something to say.
Nope, that's just nodding.
Yeah. No, I think at a company of Snap's size, the team insights has been crucial. We see this at always jumps completion because I imagine your team, while mighty, is probably still relatively lean, and you emailing every employee or chasing them versus being able to have their manager who they talk to every day. To your point, they would have like a very easy dashboard versus 50 emails, that they're like, I don't even know which one's important. I'm so glad you called that out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then this is a utterly, flattering egotistical question, but would love to know from, David, you started to allude to it, but maybe Nicole, from your perspective, what about Ethena made you interested? I know, I believe you actually maybe inherited parts of it from a predecessor, but just kind of curious what, if anything, stood out in terms of the way we try to approach the content, the admin experience, et cetera.
Yeah, no, actually, I was the one who originally suggested you.
Amazing.
And it came through a company contact, Steve Wang, I think. But
Oh yeah, okay.
yeah, but the reason I would at first I was kind of like, oh sure, but then I what I really like is you guys feel like you are a modern training platform. I think a lot of the training platforms that I review feel like you are in 1980s driver's ed.
Yeah.
And you guys don't have that feel. So that really matches with our company culture. And then since then, I think David has really liked the back end of your product.
I love that. And I feel like you two have a great partnership from everything Alana has shared too, of like, Nicole, candidly, sometimes like if people don't necessarily care if the admin is difficult to do, and like it seems like you've really invested both in a sort of thoughtful content and employee experience, but also in kind of something that makes, hopefully, David, your life a little bit more manageable in terms of the making sure the plumbing works. Like that's just so important because compliance really is about like right training to the right employee at the right time.
Yeah. No, if David said your back end was tough, we would sadly have to part ways.
Good to know. Okay, David will never let you down.
Honestly, like content is always king, right? Like if you don't have the good content, if that's just a bad experience for your learners.
Totally.
All the great admin features are a huge added bonus, right? Like me being able to just send a one-click reminder to all overdue learners is so much easier than having to pull a report,
Yeah.
copy and paste those emails into a separate email and then send individual reminders. But like to that point about content being king, there's a lot of sticky stuff in the Ethena trainings. Like in our ABAC training, there's the song. The song might be a little cheesy, but it's catchy, right? Like
So
you,
catchy.
the,
Yeah,
the commercials that stick in your head when you watch TV are the ones that have the jingles.
totally.
So I think the same applies to the Athena content.
I occasionally find myself humming that song apropos of nothing. So I totally hear you. And then you all decided to configure your anti-bribery training, meaning kind of customize it, make it really specific to Snap's policies and all of that. For either of you, could you tell me about why that was important and how your experience was kind of putting the Snap look, feel, and policies into Athena's content?
David?
Yeah, so we've undertaken a huge project in the last year or so with our learning and development team to just get trainings to have a similar look and feel,
Yep.
so that our employees feel like they're having the same experience through their employee life cycle. And then there's just a lot of like nuances and rules specific to Snap that we wanted to incorporate into the training. I think, every business is unique. So giving employees the ability to have, whether it's scenarios or links to policies that are relevant to the business that Snap is doing was important for us. And you all just made it super easy for us to do. Like we would provide you the feedback, we would provide you with the links, and you got it done. It wasn't like we were getting a lot of pushback. So we appreciated that, smooth partnership to get that done.
I love that. And Nicole, I was actually really excited to ask you about the Management Essentials course. I remember a conversation with you a while ago where you said something to the effect of you had really been looking for a course that kind of empowered managers, taught them kind of what we were earlier speaking about, to know when to speak up and what issues were flags and all of that. I guess at first I'm kind of curious, why was it so important for you to find a course that was specifically talking to managers about ethics, do the right thing, compliance?
Well, both the DOJ and some key benchmarking studies really emphasize the role that managers play.
Yep.
Team members are they're much more likely to go to their managers about issues. And if their managers create the right culture and dynamic on the teams are much more likely to even not only talk about ethical issues, but spot them in the first place. There is this amazing book that I always talk about called Blind Spots by Max Bazerman. And he says the number one ethical failure of companies or organizations is not that people are afraid to raise issues, but you create groupthink. And groupthink basically means that people, for whatever reason, just don't even realize there's an ethical issue at play. They just think of things in terms of business decisions, and it sort of neutralizes what otherwise might flag for them. Oh, this is really like a moment to step back and think about compliance or policies. And the manager can really be make or break in creating that culture of ethical awareness.
I really love that, that idea of managers as the front line. We work with Ethisphere, the organization, and they have this great, to your point, benchmark. Yeah, like 631, where it's something like for every one report that is put through a company's, say, hotline, 6 were actually raised to a manager and 3 to HR, legal, compliance. With just the idea that, exactly to your point, people are much more likely to share things with someone that they're working with on a daily basis, but that manager doesn't necessarily know that something that was just shared with them may actually be quite important to bring to legal or anything like that. So I think that's a great point.
I was trying to get a moonlighting gig as on your product development team, because I ended up.
You're hired, Nicole.
Well, your team was fantastic because the Management Essentials course was a little bit too narrowly focused on like harassment, discrimination issues for me.
Totally.
And you all were so flexible and great about allowing me to, really come back and create some custom content. And I was trying to pitch your team because I was like, you all should match up with Ethisphere, because because Ethisphere is telling everyone how important it is. Managers are the front line. They're giving everyone reports telling them you have to do this, that, the managers are the key, after the ethical culture surveys or the, world's most ethical company.
Yeah.
And I was like, you guys should just be there with the product in hand, with a partnership with Ethisphere saying, and we have it. We have like exactly, the product for you. Cause it really took me a while to find that in the marketplace. It's not easily available. A lot of the stuff that is out there is very like, it doesn't really go deep enough. It's just sort of like, hey, ethics are important, or hey, you should report concerns, but it doesn't get into that like deeper level for managers of like really understanding their role and how they impact the culture.
You may have incepted a partnership because we work really closely with Ethisphere and are continuing to. And it's actually like, making me think of a good question, which is, well, the statement is, your feedback was incredibly helpful. I've actually talked to a lot of folks in your position since who say a version of the same thing, which is I'm looking for kind of like do the right thing training for managers that is broader than just HR issues, though it should include them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, like, do the right thing is it to me is the level of employees. Like that's like
great.
go to
Same
all
more.
employees.
Yeah.
And so managers to me is like, hey, managers, do you need to understand like your role as the first line of defense, essentially, and what that means. And so it's more of a like helping them really grasp from a systemic point of view, how they can actually build ethical teams, and that's a skill.
I think that's a great nuance because I think particularly in tech, there are so many managers who were promoted yesterday. And tech, unlike maybe some more legacy industries, doesn't necessarily have those like times where they're like, here's your training on how to become this next level. Like it's, here you are, like you were an engineer one day and now you're a manager.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah. And I'm curious if you've seen that can kind of result in like very well-meaning managers, but who don't realize that being a manager isn't just like a title and a promotion, but is kind of like an added level of responsibility.
Absolutely. And even with older managers, they might just be like, well, people should know if anything's wrong, they should bring it to me. It's a version of the, I created a policy, we told them the rules, it's up to them now.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work like that. They actually have to go further than just maybe once a year saying, hey, I have an open door policy. And there's some real, there's some concrete actions they should be taking regularly as managers. And if they don't, they have a responsibility for ethical issues that arise.
I think that's so important that it's not just kind of a one and done, which is sort of core to Athena's ethos. It's like continuous learning. You shouldn't just be showing the same training year after year, have someone tune out. It has to be this like conversation versus a check the box.
Right. And it also relieves some of the burden on compliance because, another myth that a manager might have is sort of like, well, isn't that your job? Isn't your job to teach my people ethics? Right?
Yeah.
Get them to do the right thing. And what we're really telling managers is, hey, we're relying on you. You're the ones who are with your teams all day, every day. You're the ones who need to be role modeling ethics. You need to be messaging ethics. You need to be understand how to handle concerns. Like those are the three skills you have to master, and we can't do that for you.
I love that though, because it's sort of like not just like, I think empowerment or accountability on their own are very challenging, but it sounds like what you're doing is saying we're going to empower our managers with this training. But yes, we also hold them accountable to like, no, your job isn't just to make sure the product roadmap ships on time or something. It's to create an ethical and inclusive team and all of that.
Well said.
Love that.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, please, David.
I was going to add, I think a lot of managers trainings skip over conflict resolution. And you have a lot of managers who are either like conflict averse, so they won't do anything about it. Or
Sure.
you have
Yeah.
these pendulum swings the other way, and they're like, oh, I'm going to try solve this problem on my own. And
Yeah.
then they start to do like their own version of an investigation. So really being clear about when you as a manager can, help your team out versus this is a time when I should reach out to the compliance team or the legal team to get their insight.
Yeah.
So just being able to kind of give managers that guidance about when, as a manager, you should also ask for help.
Yeah.
Yes. Skill number 4.
Yeah. No, it's so true that I feel like that sometimes I got this attitude can actually be very terrifying. It's like, well, we all might need a little guidance sometimes.
Right. Yeah. Do not
Go rogue.
investigations are not DIY.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay, I've got maybe 2 more questions and just conscious of time. Would love to know, maybe David, from your experience, how Nicole, you kind of alluded to this, that our team, both product and customer success, is really receptive to your feedback, and we really do appreciate it because I think it makes the content better. David, from your experience, how's it been working with Athena's customer success team?
The customer success team is awesome. We have a really good relationship. Some vendors you dread getting on the call with, but customer success has been able to, have fun conversations with us, really get the job done, and then just do periodic check-ins. And I think that last piece is important, just checking in and making sure that everything is working smoothly. We've gone through a couple of integrations and with other products that we use at Snap. So just having that customer success team guide us through those integrations and really do it in like a fun and kind way. There's nothing worse than like having to send files and do integrations with technologies and just being bored to bits.
Yeah.
So having lighthearted conversations and at the same time just like working towards achieving our goals has been amazing.
I love that. We have 4 values, and one of ours is humor is human. So I'm glad to hear that our CS team has been living that. Okay, second to last question. I noticed that both of you either work with organizations kind of dedicated to diversity or have like DEI in your titles. And this may seem like an odd question, so no worries if it doesn't resonate. But I remember when I started at Ethena, I really had this idea that like ethics and inclusion do go together. They aren't separate, but I kind of noticed that sometimes in the compliance field, they actually can feel very separate. And it's like HR does inclusion and legal and compliance do ethics, and they don't. And in my mind, I thought that there was a miss because I feel like sort of treating, they rely on the same sort of principles of being thoughtful and all of that. I was just kind of like curious, like how, if at all, have you found these 2 fields to relate?
Do you want to go first this time, David?
Sure. So, I think we're very lucky that Snap puts DEI, at the very top of one of our core values. And, you might see in trainings that, the idea of DEI is just putting, people of different backgrounds into the training. But we really try to think of scenarios that are going to apply to people from different walks of life. We also, want to make things that are accessible. So, for example, we make sure that our policies and anything that we post to our internet can be read by a screen reader. So it's just really being considerate of other people's backgrounds, their abilities. We work with our HR team, we work with our L&D team to make sure that before we go to launch with certain products, they've provided their input on these things. Nicole can speak more to it, but I know she works with very closely HR and employment legal on a number of DEI initiatives. But I think it's nice that we work for a company that lets us take those things into consideration. So that just it's so much easier to merge compliance and business with DEI.
I love that. And our design team kind of has a similar perspective, and really early on pursued, never know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but like WCAG accessibility for all of our content. And I thought like, oh, surely, especially for things like DEI, training, harassment prevention, this is industry standard. And we learned it wasn't. It was like, that seems like a real show don't tell, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, Nicole, yeah, I would love to hear your perspective.
Yeah. So I've done a ton of DEI work. I'm Latina and have done, it's been part of my journey since law school, which is now far, far away, a long time ago. And yeah, that was one of the things that I got excited about with ethics and compliance, because I do feel like there's such a Venn diagram of DEI work and ethics and inclusion work. And sometimes I've said, I feel like people leading DEI work are really like the canaries in the coal mine of the organizational ethics. They're the ones who are standing a little bit outside the system enough to say, wow, we have a huge blind spot over here, or, oh my God, the way we think about this is really messed up, or, how come no one's taking this into account? And so the organizational work that you have to do to correct those processes to really, widen your awareness, to really understand the impact of actions, to have that level of thoughtfulness, is exactly the same foundational work you need to do to avoid compliance issues.
Yeah, I know. I think that's so right. And I feel like I've seen some studies that kind of back this up, like correlations of sort of HR issues and ethics issues and all of that. But I also just like back to experiences inform like the work we do in the Army. Remember seeing that like ethical managers were also inclusive managers. Like it usually wasn't that someone spiked in one and not the other. It's that they kind of got that this was sort of a holistic leadership philosophy they were bringing. And I just, I always thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I think it's probably, I don't have a study to back this up, but I'll say anecdotally, when you read massive corporate scandals or fails, there's very often a lot of tea there about how toxic the environment was, particularly for people who weren't part of the majority. And so those two things go very much hand in hand.
Yep. Well, we'll go look and see what studies Ethisphere has, because I'm sure they have something. Okay, my closeout question is, Snap is a deeply cool company. That's what I imagine just from the outside in. And I'm just kind of curious for both of you, have you either had a moment where you felt very cool working at Snap, or the reverse? This is so nice how I feel working at a startup. I feel deeply uncool because I've realized I just do not know the lingo or whatever. Maybe David, do you want to start with you? Not to put you on the spot, but.
No, it's okay. So I was recently at a Teams all hands, giving just a quick intro of who we were. And their icebreaker question was, what was the last song you listened to? And as everyone is going around, I'm thinking, I don't know who like 90% of these artists are. Which I was like, okay, does that make me uncool? I don't know. Maybe we just have different tastes in music. But the other side of the coin was, it's cool to work for a company that like has all these varying interests in music or creative outlets. So it's just kind of like cool to see both sides of that.
I love that. My team laughed at me because the last song I listened to is the only artist I listened to consistently, which is Taylor Swift, which like I think maybe is cool again. I don't know, but I've listened to her when it was not cool. And my taste in music is deeply uncool. And I'm okay with that. So I totally understand. Nicole, for you?
So I often send out memes to our team.
Nice. Okay.
And to past former colleagues who I keep in the loop. And I often choose deeply uncool memes that are like dad jokes.
Nice.
And I will laugh out loud to myself as I'm posting them. And then after I've posted them, we'll go back and reread my own memes and laugh at them.
I love this because I feel like, life's just too short, and a good dad joke, like I can appreciate it. Do you find that the laughs are also shared by others, or is it kind of a like you may be the only one there?
No, people are right in there with me.
Okay, good. Yeah, then it's great. It's like know your audience. Amazing. Okay,
Yeah.
well, David and Nicole, I so appreciate you sharing your experience at Snap, working with Ethena, and just this like really fun conversation. And thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Roxanne.
Thank you.